Hi, I'm Dr. Sam Illingworth, and welcome to Roast the Post, the story behind the bullet points.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Roast the Post. This week, Jen and I have a guest in the studio with us for the first time ever, Dr. Sam Illingworth, who is an atmospheric physics lecturer and teacher in the UK, science educator, and works for a very prestigious university, which we will not name because, as y'all know, we do not name and shame. Dr. Sam, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Paul. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Paul. Delighted to be here. Also, I'm not correcting or anything like that, but my physics PhD was like 20 years ago, Paul. These I would fail my undergraduate degree. Like, I don't know what I am. I'm some kind of social scientist, come poet, come educator. Yeah, but definitely not a physicist. I call myself a lapsed physicist these days, I guess.
It's funny. Like we were talking, we were chatting the other day, and I commented on one of your posts that I haven't cited primary source research in anything I've done for 20 years, and I forget how to do it.
I think we need to note too that Dr. Sam has one of our favorite Substack accounts, Slow AI. You can find Dr. Sam on Substack, and I think it's important to note that's how all three of us actually connected. So go check that out for sure.
Yeah, we'll put a link to that in the show notes for sure, folks. You should absolutely check out Dr. Sam's Substack.
Why are you laughing?
I'm creasing because I'm just Sam. Like, unless you're like HMRC or the IRS, you do not need to call me Dr. Sam. Sam's
We always call you Dr. Sam. We refer to you as Dr. Sam. Listen, I told you once, if I had a PhD, my dogs would be calling me Dr. Jen. Everyone would be calling me doctors. I would have the license plates that said Dr. Jen. So,
but it's honest, like, what's really interesting is contextually, like, because I have a lot of like American colleagues that we do a lot of work with as well. And like for me, I made full professor like 2 years ago, but in the UK, professor is like a proper title. So in the like States and Canada, right, like anyone that teaches is professor. Yeah, it's not necessarily a title thing. Whereas in the UK, it's like a big deal. So like I don't call myself Dr. Illingworth in the UK. I'd call myself Professor Illingworth, although I wouldn't because that would make me a douchebag. But like I would like being called Professor Illingworth is like, or Professor Sam is a bigger thing than Dr. Sam, if that makes sense, which took ages to understand because when I was like, oh, I'm a professor, everyone was like, yeah, but that just means that you're assistant prof at like a college. I was like, no, that's not quite what it means. But long story short, you can just call me Sam. It's absolutely okay.
So what I'm hearing is we should be calling you Dr. Professor Sam. Is that?
Professor Sam, PhD, MA, MPhys, PFHDA, whatever you want to call me.
I didn't know that though. That's true. Like back home for us, professor is kind of like no biggie. Like my mom taught Spanish at a local university and called herself professor, right? Like that's not, and she wasn't. She's a lot of things, but not that. So yeah, that's really interesting piece of information. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're going to find through my read in this job ad, we're going to find tons, or job advert, I should say. I apologize. We're going to find tons of things like that where little bits of language stick out, and I've got quite a nice little pile of notes on. What does this actually mean? Because over here in North America, it means this, but I feel like it means that. Sam?
No, definitely. And I guess one thing, like there's loads of stuff, but service is something that always comes up as being very different in the UK compared to North America institutes as well. Like, you know, and we might get into it, but service is basically shorthand for stuff that you're going to do and not get paid for, which, you know, it's not really great in any way, shape or form.
That's a great segue into beginning the show. So we're going to kick it off, folks, and everybody at home, if you hadn't picked up on it already, Sam is from the UK, and we are roasting a job ad in the UK this week for something a little bit different. We'll start off with the roasty profile as usual. So the job title is Lecturer in Law, Teaching and Scholarship. The report to title, not listed in the job advert. Size of the institution, 5,001 to 10,000 employees. The industry is higher education. What does the organization do? Well, undergraduate and graduate level programs, basic research, and many other things that are worthy of taxpayer funding. Head office location, Cardiff, Wales, UK. Job location, also Cardiff in the UK. Geographical operating area throughout the United Kingdom and, kind of secondarily, I would say globally, depending on the nature of the work that this person is doing. Job type is full-time, which is defined as 35 hours per week, and on-site, open-ended, which, note for the folks in North America, open-ended is just another way of saying it's a permanent job. It's not a temporary or a contract role. Now, the first thing that came up for me, Sam, and maybe before we really get into the job ad, is they say the School of Law and Politics at Fancy University, and again, we remove the names of the guilty because we don't name and shame on this show, is seeking to appoint a lecturer, grade 6 in law. What does grade 6 mean? Can you give us an outline for that? Because that means something very different here. That would mean you're about 9 years old.
Okay, so grades are really different. Again, not even across the 4 devolved nations of the United Kingdom. Let's just go crazy into what the United Kingdom even is, first of all, right? So the United Kingdom is actually a collection of many different islands. So we would have Great Britain, which is England, Scotland, and Wales, plus Northern Ireland. That plus the Channel Islands, loads of little, like the Isle of Wight, not the Isle of Man. These countries basically make up the United Kingdom, and then Great Britain would be England, Scotland, and Wales. Not necessarily segue, but the grade points across each of those devolved nations are different, and they're also different at an institutional level as well. So in Scotland, for example, a grade 6 post would be a lecturer, which roughly tracks in North America onto an assistant professor. Grade 7 would tend to be an associate professor, and grade 8 would tend to be a full professor. And then above that, you would just go into different levels of full professor and then into deans and stuff like that. So roughly speaking, grade 6, although it changes on institute, tracks as a lecturer, which in the United Kingdom would be your first tenured post. Again, tenure works very different in the United Kingdom to North America. Basically, you apply once you get a grade 6 role or a lecturer, you're kind of in the system, and then you work your way up, typically through lecturer, senior lecturer, associate professor, professor. We would sometimes call associate professor reader for weird historical reasons. But to go back to not being that usual academic thing of giving you way too long an answer, but basically grade 6 means lecturer or assistant professor.
Now with tenure, in a lot of North American universities, tenure means that you can't be fired, except for the most egregious, basically barely short of criminal problems. Is it the same in the UK? Once you have tenure, you're kind of set.
Yeah, same. Obviously, apart from restructures that happen, and that happening a lot in the higher education sector at the moment, and like other redundancies, gross negligence, etc. But yeah, it's a closed contract. And again, think in the UK, what would typically happen is if you were going down the academic role, you would do your PhD, you'd do numerous numbers of postdocs until you got your first tenured position, which would normally be a lecturing role or a grade 6 role, and then you'd work your way up. That's definitely what happened to me. Other people might go into industry and come back into it in different ways, shapes, or forms, but that kind of real slog and where the huge leaky pipeline is those initial postdoctoral roles. So those roles immediately after your PhD, and then when you get tenure as well. So the kind of people that would be applying for this role they'd be broadly speaking, three groups. There'd be people that were coming straight from a PhD that were maybe exceptional candidates. And this is a learning and teaching role, so you wouldn't necessarily be expecting lots of research and published papers, but we'll get onto that as well. The second type of person that'd be applying for it would be people who've done the hard slog of the postdoctoral research positions. So these are fixed term contracts, normally between 1 and 3 years. And again, it varies, but people would tend to do 2, 3, 4 of those before they either left the pipeline or were lucky enough to get tenure. And it is luck, I would like to point out, in a lot of that.
Yeah. So that's really good context. What that kind of tells us is that this job ad, this position is it's fairly a big deal. It's going to be coveted. There are going to be a lot of people who are fighting really hard to get this role.
I mean, I would say from being on the other side of the panel and interviewing people at that grade 6 role, you'd be looking at, even for a kind of middle of the range university or higher education institute, you'd be looking at several hundred applicants, up to a few thousand. So yeah, it would be quite a coveted role, I would say, especially at a prestigious university.
Is it typical then so you just found this posting, Paul? Did you go and search? Okay, so would it be typical then for a university like this to use a recruiter and try to like headhunt, if you will, or are they just looking for people to, because I feel like, like you said, they're going to get so many applicants. Is it typical practice to go and maybe use a firm, or do they have in-house recruiters to find their candidates?
It's a great question, Jen. So I would say for the senior positions, that definitely does happen, but you would be expecting that at professorial level or dean level. For the lower grades, most of them are going to be advertised on a website in the UK called jobs.ac.uk, which is maybe where Paul found this.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's where all of those jobs are posted. And I would say that because the sector itself is not in dire straits, but it's quite competitive at the moment, they're going to be getting loads of applications. And the third person that would apply for this is people that from another institute, either wanting to move for family reasons or because like sideways, it's a slightly better institute or something like that as well. And what I would say though, Jen, is the way that things get cut down is you tend to have, I guess similar in other roles, but there'll be a list of essential criteria and a list of desirable criteria that have to be met. And what they'll do is they won't even consider putting that in front of the hiring board unless they meet the essential criteria. There'll be absolute red lines. So a red line for this will be, in most positions like this, an absolute red line would be a PhD. So if you don't have a PhD or you're waiting for your viva voce, like you wouldn't even be considered for this role. And again, being on the hiring panel, you don't necessarily want to be looking at several hundred applicants. It's super hard. And again, it's very complex, but what would tend to happen is you would have to answer a load of questions that basically ask you to replicate your CV, as well as sending in your CV, as well as sending in your statement of support and your referee letters, and then me on the hiring team. And the hiring teams tend to be made up of the dean of the school, a couple of senior academics, and sometimes someone from HR, but that is not a guaranteed.
And do you get voluntold to be on the hiring committee, or is that something that you can just opt in to do for experience, or how does that work?
That's a great question. I would say it's quite translucent in that I like being on those hiring committees for two reasons. One, it's helped me massively in terms of understanding what's needed. And two, I think it's really important to have voices who like push for diversity in these hiring roles. But it's normally a case of, hey, we've got this role coming up. Can you sit on that panel? And it's different from institute to institute, and it's also really hard, right? Because actually I think more junior members of staff should be on those hiring panels because it's great experience for them. But then at the same time, what happens is those really capable junior people like get landed with loads of work. So then it becomes a lot for them as well, like we'd see in other industries.
Yeah. All right, let's carry on with the text. So this is just the preamble to the job ad. It's only a couple of pages. It's relatively short, which is a nice change for Jen and I. It reads, the successful candidate will, or have the potential to be, an excellent teacher and scholar, be close to completing or already hold a PhD or hold equivalent professional experience in law or a cognate field by the time the appointment begins, and have an ambitious scholarship agenda. From a teaching perspective, the successful candidate will have the ability and willingness to teach public law or EU law. The post holder may also be supported to supervise undergraduate students. And it says this post is full-time, 35 hours, open-ended, and available immediately. Please direct any queries relating to this post to the head of school at email address redacted. Appointments to roles at fancy university are usually made at bottom of scale unless in exceptional circumstances. Now, I'm going to pause there very briefly. Sam, what does that mean, bottom of scale?
So what that will mean is that within each of the grade boundaries, there will tend to be about a 6 to 8 point scale. So broadly speaking, let's say grade 6 is somewhere between 35 and 45,000 pounds. So you can track that to Canadian dollars. And then each of those will have like an increment. Now, what will typically happen is you will be hired at the bottom of that band, unless you can demonstrate you were in a previous role that was higher up. That's happened to me in the past. But the universities will tend to lowball you. And they will always come in at the very lowest point, basically.
Not just universities.
Yeah, it's private sector too.
Yeah.
Jen and I talk about that a lot. Okay, that's good. So they're saying that they are going to pay as little as possible at the very start.
They're being honest.
So at least they're being honest, yeah. This was posted on Friday, 20th February 2026, and it says there's a closing date of Sunday, 8th March 2026. And for posterity, folks, we're recording on March 24th. Fancy University is committed to supporting and promoting equality and diversity and to creating, that's what it says, an inclusive working environment. We believe this can be achieved through attracting, developing, and retaining a diverse range of staff from many different backgrounds. We therefore welcome applicants from all sections of the community, regardless of sex, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, trans identity, relationship status, religion or belief, caring responsibilities, or age. We especially welcome and encourage applications from those from underrepresented groups within the university workforce, such as those who identify as LGBT plus BAME, or those with disabilities. In supporting our employees to achieve a balance between their work and their personal lives, we will also consider proposals for flexible working or job sharing arrangements. Applications may be submitted in Welsh, and an application submitted in Welsh will not be treated less favorably than an application submitted in English. Let's pause there. Sam, what did you think about that section? Did it strike you as relatively normal? Like for me, what I found interesting was they're saying you can submit your application in Welsh, which makes sense. It's Cardiff, it's in Wales, and it won't be treated any differently than an application submitted in English. That cues to me that there has historically been a cultural problem, and that Welsh candidates have been treated unfairly compared to English candidates. But what else stuck out for you?
It's pretty standard what they're talking about. Again, I'd just like to add some additional context that we've got in the UK that I think is pretty good in terms of inclusivity. So we used to have something called the 2-tick system for disability, which is basically if you as a candidate who identifies as having a disability meet the essential criteria, you are guaranteed an interview. This has recently been replaced by something called, I think, the Disability Confidence Scheme, where you've got different levels depending on what you sign up for as an employer. So if you have, I think if you've basically signed up for the levels 2 and 3, then you have that guaranteed interview scheme again, which basically guarantees an interview to any disabled applicant who meets the minimum criteria for a job vacancy. It's a bit like the Rooney rule that you'd have like in the North Americas for race as well. Also, we have things around reasonable adjustments and voluntary disclosure as well. I would say that element of things has moved massively in a positive way in the past decade or so in the UK. The rest of the stuff is just standard, what you'd see in an application form. And I don't know how what university wouldn't say that they're inclusive?
Sure.
I mean, that's
This is what's interesting to me is that like they're saying that they're welcoming applications from all of these like underrepresented groups, but if historically it really hasn't been that way and they're looking for those 3 categories that you listed, then really how diverse is their pool going to be, right? Like that's, to me, that's what's really interesting. And I also want to know, whenever companies make statements like that, I would also like to know how they are doing it. It's one thing to say that they're doing it, but then like how are you? And a quick example, like we are working with maybe this society or this group or posting, I don't know.
So do they mention something called Athena Swan at all in there, Paul? So
they don't. They
okay,
do not.
Athena Swan is kind of like the UK's gold standard for gender equity in hiring, and has done some amazing work. So what would Jen makes a really good point in terms of actually listing things that they're doing, but that would be something that you could easily do, and that some institutes do as well, that we work with Athena Swan to make sure that we build equity in this. But, you know, it's really important to be honest about this. You know, I'm a white, heterosexual, cisgendered, middle-class man. Like, universities are dominated by people like me, like women of color, people with disabilities. They are massively underrepresented in the university sector. And the thing that I always do is you don't look at the percentage of those peoples within the university. You map it against the national percentages of those people. So, you know, like what percentage of people in Scotland are Black women? And then how does that map onto, or in Wales in this instance, how does that map onto the percentage of people with tenure at a Welsh university that are Black women? So, and again, for me, they're very, very readily available statistics that you could put in that document. So you could say along the line, you know, we are committed to having gender equity. This is the percentage of men and women living in Wales, and this is what the percentage is at our institute. And again, not to call out classy university institute here, but a lot of these are just empty words. And in my opinion, even though it's very difficult sometimes to do this because of how discrimination laws work in the UK, there should be an element of, there's a better word for this, but positive discrimination in terms of purposefully hiring people to fill those roles in order to get the institute up to national levels of protected characteristics.
This is it. Yeah. I think that can be said in a couple of sentences, right? Just adding that. But again, places who won't add that extra context or actually make that commitment, there's a reason why. It's because they're not going to. That's not going to be a priority. So yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, certainly statistics around that, like providing some sort of organizational profile, would make the job advert a heck of a lot more appealing. But then on the other side of it, do they need to? Like, you know, like Sam said, we're getting hundreds of candidates probably for this already, perhaps 1,000. Do we need to promote ourselves even more? Perhaps not.
No.
Carrying on. So the job description itself. Now, this section's kind of long. I'm just going to go through the entire thing. It's quite well structured, I think. Job description, main duties and responsibilities. Undertake a full teaching load, including the development, delivery, and evaluation of public law and/or EU law within the undergraduate post and post-qualification provision within the school, to supervise students and to carry out administrative duties within the work area as required, to pursue excellence in teaching, and to inspire others to do the same. Then we have a number of subsections, the first of which is teaching. Design and deliver, these are bullet points, design and deliver teaching programs for courses and contribute to module development as part of a module team. Inspire undergraduate and postgraduate students under the guidance of a mentor/module leader and develop skills in assessment methods and in providing constructive feedback to students. Supervise the work of students, including the supervision of undergraduate and master's students and the co-supervision of PGRs. Now, briefly, PGR, what's that?
That's a postgraduate researcher. So that would be a PhD student or a taught master student.
Okay. Next bullet point is supply pastoral care through both acting as a personal tutor and providing support and guidance to students, building and establishing trust. The next subsection is scholarship. Contribute to scholarship in the area of work through participation in conferences, seminars, and other academic and professional forums to disseminate the results of individual scholarship. Engage in scholarly activity through journal articles and/or outputs which advance knowledge within the area of work. Contribute to scholarship through interdisciplinary working with individuals and teams within and external to the wider university community. Carry out other forms of scholarship, including work associated with examinations, for example, setting and marking paper and providing constructive feedback to students. In administration, participation in community committee work, my apologies. The last subsection is other, and bullet points again. Engage effectively with industrial, commercial, and public sector organizations, professional institutions, other academic institutions, etc., regionally and nationally to raise awareness of the school's profile, to cultivate strategically valuable alliances, and to pursue opportunities for collaboration across a range of activities. These activities are expected to contribute to the school and the enhancement of its regional and national profile. Take a breath. That was one bullet point. Next bullet point, undergo personal and professional development that is appropriate to and which will enhance performance in the role of lecturer. Mentor colleagues with less experience and advise on personal development. Participate in school administration and activities to promote the work and the school to the wider university as well as the outside world. Any other duties not included above but consistent with the role. We'll take a pause there. That was, was a lot. There was a lot of detail for bullet points. I found it was a bit full-mouthed at points, but what were your impressions on the descriptions of the job, Sam?
Actually quite good. So what I would say is traditionally in the UK, lecturers or assistant professors or professors have had to do everything like teaching and research and like knowledge exchange, etc. And I would say being a good researcher doesn't necessarily make you a good teacher. There are people that that's an exception for. And again, what's tended to happen in the UK is if you bring in a large research grant, you get rewarded by having teaching taken off you, which then creates this weird dichotomy that teaching is seen as lesser than research. Not the same for every institute. But things are changing a bit more recently, and people have kind of realized that maybe it would make sense to have different tracks. So you would have different promotional tracks in terms of learning and teaching, research, enterprise. But then you'd also have like this, somebody whose main role is to be doing the teaching with maybe a little bit of scholarship on the side. So what I thought was really good about this was there was a lot of detail in the teaching. The danger is that what they might do is hire somebody who is okay at teaching, but has an exemplary research track record, because then they will bring in money for the university. That's always the worry with these kind of positions. The one thing I'd say was a bit of a glaring omission is I found it really strange that there was no mention of fellowship of advanced HE. So traditionally, this used to be the Higher Education Academy, and it's normally always a desirable or essential criteria for a teaching role to have fellowship or associate fellowship of advanced HE. So you'd have fellowship, you'd have associate fellowship, fellowship, senior fellowship, and principal fellowship. I've got principal fellowship. That's not a humble brag. It's just you work your way through these fellowship. It was a humble brag.
It's a very, very good point about separating out those two tracks, researching and teaching. That's a common theme here in North America, where research is seen as more important. And because of that, the incentive structures are really like lean towards research, because that's what brings in donations to the foundation and grants and all of the funding streams that come from both private and private and public sources. Whereas teaching, the incentive stream, the incentive like structure is completely different. Does it make for better quality education for undergraduate students to have someone who can essentially fundraise resources for the university? No. Does it make for better quality research to have a teacher who is amazing and inspires and motivates? Maybe, yes, but a little bit indirectly. So putting those two things together, squishing them together, it's kind of broken from a systemic standpoint.
Definitely. And the thing I always push back that as well, though, is that actually, even from a fiscal point of view, let's imagine that you are the module leader or program leader for a large business studies course that's got 200 international students on, each of which are paying £30,000 a year to come onto, right? If you can retain all of those students through exceptional teaching, that is worth more than any research grant than your university will be able to bring in that year. But that's never talked about, which I always found really interesting, because even if you think about, epistemologically, what the point of the university is, just from a purely economic or fiscal standpoint, excellent teaching often can bring in much more money than excellent research, which is something that's not often accounted for in incentivization schemes.
This is so interesting because it's something that I'm writing a piece a little bit on that, and like who we reward in the workplace, because it's the same in any organization. Like if you have a really good manager who is a great people manager and is retaining their team, and like that's that's become like the expectation, and so it's not seen as exceptional work in any way, shape, or form, and yet then there are other people who maybe almost do the opposite and drive people away, but they're brilliant jerks or they're really good at whatever. Then they're the ones who get rewarded. They're the ones who get like the big bonuses or big raises or whatever. And it's very, yeah, it's just that silent work that is really, when you're looking at return on investment, or, you know, maybe you're not bringing in the money, but are you saving the company money by decreasing attrition, things like that? And yeah, it often just gets overlooked.
Which suggests a metrics problem, right?
Yeah.
Like these things that could potentially bring in more revenue, more funding to the university or to a private organization, whatever, through exceptional teaching or people management.
Yeah.
What are the metrics to track that? I feel like a lot of organizations are really underdeveloped in that area. Certainly, I've worked in them, and I've seen kind of firsthand that gets missed. You get rewarded for sales till like the cows come home. You know, it's very easy. You brought in 25 million in revenue, you get bonus based on that. But you know, your people, their contributions as a leader, how is that captured? Are you rewarded for that? Very, very, very rarely. I've never seen a structural, systemic way to do that.
No, me neither. I do have a question about the section that you just read, a question for you, Sam. In the other section, it said something about personal and professional development. And we've seen this now a few times in the job postings, where I'm more used to seeing, you know, people who are committed to their professional development. What do they mean by personal development? Like
they don't know what they mean. They don't care about that. They don't care about that. No one's going to, like, when you're looking at the application, no one's going to go, well, this person has 10 research papers published in Nature, but they have no outside interests. Whereas, oh, this person has 2 publications in mid-range journals, but wow, look, they volunteer at a food bank. Let's give them the role. Yeah, they don't care about that. They write it down because it's something that they feel has to be written down.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is Jen and I, who each have 0 articles published in a journal but host this podcast, don't get bonus points for that?
Sadly not.
Dang it.
Let's move on. Let's move on to the final section. So this section is called Person Specification, and it begins with important note to candidates. It is the university's policy to use the person specification as a key tool for shortlisting, and we only invite candidates to interview who clearly evidence that they meet or partially meet each of the essential criteria. During the application process, you'll be asked to attach a supporting statement. This statement must outline how you meet the criteria below, and we recommend formatting this by using each criteria as a subheading and providing your relevant experience/evidence below each subheading. It is crucial that you save your supporting statement with the vacancy number, in brackets, e.g. 1234BR, in the file name, as failure to do so may result in it being omitted from your application. Then it goes into essential criteria. There are a couple of subsections here. The first, qualifications and education. Postgraduate degree at the PhD level in a related subject area or relevant industrial experience. Next subsection is knowledge, skills, and experience. Teaching experience at undergraduate or postgraduate level relevant to public law or EU law. Demonstrate specialist knowledge and current advancements within academic subject area relevant to public law or EU law. Ability to design, deliver, and continuously develop modules across the school's teaching programs. The next subsection is pastoral communication and team working. Excellent communication skills with the ability to present complex and conceptual ideas clearly and confidently to others using high-level skills and a range of media. The ability to provide appropriate pastoral support to students, appreciate the needs of individual students and their circumstances, and to act as a personal tutor. The next subsection, other, has proven ability to demonstrate creativity, innovation, and team working within work. The final subsection is desirable criteria, relevant professional qualifications, evidence of collaborations with industry, proven ability to work without close supervision. And that is it for the final part of the job advert. Now, Sam, before we get into your commentary, one thing that is kind of curiously poking about at my brain is pastoral support. The way that I think about that is it brings up kind of this image of like someone in the clergy with like the little neck thing being a lecturer, and that's a requirement, and you're saying pastoral support, which means you have to be a person of God, but we can't say that because it's discriminatory. I suspect that it means something different in this context in the UK. Can you explain that to us?
It basically just means being there to help your students with their life and with dealing with university as well.
Okay.
And I would say it is the most important part of being a teacher, and it's the one that receives zero training for. So, you know, I'll speak from my own experiences. I have had students in my office in tears, like talking about their mental health issues, their problems at home. You know, I've had to signpost people to like severe mental health needs expertise, to suicide prevention organizations, and we receive no training for this. And it really does cause a huge mental burden on the teaching staff as well. So it's very much this is a great thing to have. I don't think it's very annoying for me because it's a bit like communication skills. It's something that people think you're born innately with, which is not true. These are skills that should be learned and which can be taught. But I've been in academia for almost 2 decades now. I have never had a single training session or being taught how to deal with students in that situation.
That is wild to me. First of all, Paul, I had the same question written down, pastoral.
Yeah, because it's not a thing here. We don't talk about that in job postings. Like we might talk about counseling. Makes perfect sense.
It makes sense. Like it kind of matches there. That's so unfortunate, and that's disheartening. I would imagine that you probably have had situations in every single class that you've taught. Do the schools themselves, they don't have on-site counseling services, or? It
will depend on each institute, and like they're getting better. So we would have like mental health first aid training for certain people, and there would be allies on campus as well. But it's really at the periphery of what it should be. And you know, my teaching load is a lot less than what it used to be. But for those colleagues who have a very high teaching load, who teach, let's say, classes with 300 international students, those students are each individuals who have, imagine coming from Nigeria to Scotland. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're basically, it's really difficult because you see both things. You see teachers who maybe aren't giving the pastoral care that they should, but then you also see the fact, well, they've never been taught what that should look like either.
Absolutely. And I think in situations like that, it's even sending them to, say, an on-site counselor. You really need that quick response. You need trauma-informed training, trauma responsiveness, and you need to be able to know what to say in that moment as it's happening. You don't want to send someone away and say, "Oh, well, I'm not sure, but let me get back to you." Those can be emergency situations, and so without that training, it's very risky, and it puts a lot on you as the professor. That's really, really interesting to me. The fact that it is a category in and of itself, they're declaring the importance of it, and yet, like you said, the support isn't there to actually do that successfully. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, so let's go into, this is one of my favorite parts of the show. Jen loathes it, and that actually kind of makes me laugh a little bit. I get the giggles every time she says, I hate this so much. We're going to guess the salary range, Sam. It was provided, but based on your experience and what you've kind of seen in the higher education industry in the UK, what do you think the salary range for this job is posted at?
Okay, this is going to be 30 to 37,000 pounds.
Wow. Okay. So the posted range, 41,064 pounds per annum to 46,049 pounds per annum. So they were more generous than you were.
That's really good. No, that's good. I'm massively out of touch with how much I should be earning.
This is what I hate. This is why I hate this. I get it wrong every single. I thought you were going to make me guess too, Paul, and I was just going to say whatever Sam said.
That would seem cruel and unusual. No, Jen and I both very frequently lowball the salaries, or sorry, we highball the salaries. Jen is typically 10 to 20% higher than the posted range, and I'm typically around that too. Like we always think a little bit worse of the institution than is reality, and you're kind of the opposite here. You think that they're worse than they actually were. Now, can you comment on that salary range? 40 to 46,000 pounds per annum sort of range. If you're living in Cardiff, is that a decent livable salary for the area?
Okay, I would say that house prices, and other people can correct me on this, but I would say house prices in Cardiff are not as bad as they would be in Edinburgh, and certainly not as bad as they would be in London. I would say that, or Cardiff, or like Cambridge or Oxford, or anywhere like that, in the centre you would struggle with that. But I think that would be a very reasonable amount. I think cost of living in Cardiff as a capital city would be lower than some of the other cities that you would expect in England as well. So I think that would be a reasonable salary in order to eke out an existence whilst living in Cardiff.
Especially if you're building your career. This is your first kind of rung on the ladder, perhaps it's okay. All right, folks, we're going to go into a short intermission. Then we will be back with final scores and some takeaways for anyone who is applying for a job like this or writing a job like this. Stay tuned. Hey, everybody, welcome back. We are at that very special part of the show where we're ready to render the verdicts and fire up the barbecue torches. So, Jen, thinking about this job post, both from the perspective of how the job post was written and how the role was designed, what would you score this, starting with how the job ad was written?
I mean, this is new territory for me, and so it sounds like it's pretty standard. I would say maybe 7 out of 10 for me. I would like to see more about, and this not just specific to this job posting, but in general, I like to know how, if they want you to be excellent in this or whatever, and they use the word excellence a lot, well, what are they doing to support you? So there's not much, and Sam had mentioned it. What about your career track? There wasn't much to talk about, like what's in it for you. It's mostly like you need to be all of these things. And there was very little, if any, here's how we reciprocate that. So for me, 7 out of 10 on that part. I don't know rating for anything else because I'm not really familiar with the reporting structure, whether or not the job design itself makes sense. So I really don't have thoughts on that. I don't have a score on that. I don't know how I would score that because I just don't know that structure, what structures are like at universities.
We'll give you a pass. So you have an 8 out of 10 on the job ad.
7 out of 10.
Oh, 7 out of 10 on the job ad. Okay. For me, I looked at the job ad and it was quite well structured. It was easy to read. It was succinct. It was only a couple of pages, which is nice. Like they put a lot of meaty information into the available space. I would give this an 8 out of 10. Now, I felt that it was a bit wordy, especially some of those bullet points that were paragraphs. You could break that into a couple of different bullet points. You could simplify what you're saying. I felt like there was some redundant information that someone who's applying for this job, they very easily could have made the leap between what you said in 50 words and what you could have said in maybe 20 words. Could have been simplified. But as Sam indicated earlier, academics like to, talk and have the words. So maybe it's par for the course. When it comes to the role design, I was a little bit more critical. And my comments are through the lens of I recognize that these are systemic problems, but you have to start somewhere if you're going to fix them. I gave this a 6 out of 10 for the role design. A couple of things really, really stood out for me. Separating that track, the research track versus the teaching track, we talked about that a little bit. That's a big, big systemic failing in my standpoint of this job advert, or of the role design, I should say. And, you know, all the reasons why it's kind of squished together, the incentive structure and everything, totally get that. But you need to start somewhere with change. So if you'd separated out these two incentive tracks, made this a research position or a teaching position, I felt that it could have been better. Another big thing that really, really stood out for me that I scored quite negatively against was the lack of support for pastoral care. It's talked about in the job ad as if it's a bit of a throwaway, a bit of an afterthought, a bit of an expectation that's just normalized, you must do it. But it feels like there's nothing there to support it. And Sam said that this is a big part of teaching at this level, and it's probably one of the most important parts from a human perspective. So that suggests to me that it could have been designed differently. Support structures could have been different. They could have talked about any training that's available for this role, and as Sam stated, probably isn't any. There should be. So I docked at a couple of points for that. What did you think, Sam? First on the job post, what would you score this out of 10?
So I guess I should first of all caveat what I consider to be good or average. I'm a very optimistic person, and scoring's subjective, right? So for me, a 7 is average. And a lot of people would disagree and say that a 5 is average, but I think a 7 is average. So I would give this, if we're allowed half points, a 7.5 for the job advert, because this is fairly consistent. Like, I don't want to score it against what an ideal job advert should be. I want to score it against what's kind of industry standard, because yeah, maybe they could make it better, but it's what we'd expect. I liked how they separated teaching from research, and I liked how teaching was actually at the forefront. Things that I think could improve it would be to have actual metrics, like what does success look like? What does excellence look like? Can we have some examples of that? And the other thing I'd really like to see is, as Jen alluded to, what's in it for the candidate? What does professional and personal development even look like? And then in terms of the role itself, again, I'd probably give it like a 7.5. Like this, it's set up to be a standard position. There's nothing that's too far beyond what you'd expect, but again, would be nice to see some more exemplars of what that support would look like, what excellence looks like, what a career pathway looks like as well. So yeah, just kind of middle of the road, nothing too bad. And I think they will get a lot of candidates, and with this, they'll probably get a successful candidate as well to fill the position. If I was to give recommendations for applying for this job and for rewriting the job, if you're rewriting the job, just give specific essential criteria, like what do you mean by excellence? And if you're applying for this job, what I always think is go to the mission statement of the university, pick out 2 or 3 excellent other academics, and say how your work will align with theirs and how it will align with what the school's mission objectives are going forward.
Yeah, and you can dot that together with the I think they called it a suitability statement that you have to submit with your application. That's really good advice. So folks who are going to look for a job like this and are applying for a job like this, look at the mission statement of the organization, bring that into your personal statement, and build a case essentially for why you're going to make the perfect lecturer, the best lecturer. What are the objectives the organization has? How can you address those objectives in a way that makes sense for them? That's great advice. Thanks, Sam. So folks, that is another episode of Roast the Post. We can consider this post roasted. Dr. Sam Illingworth, thank you very, very much for joining us. We were thrilled to have you here.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.
Glad you could spend some time with us on Roast the Post, the story behind the bullet points. If today's episode helped you make sense of the hiring landscape, or at least feel less alone in navigating it, don't forget to subscribe. You can find us on YouTube or follow the show on whatever podcast app you trust with your sanity. We're always looking for interesting job postings to break down. So if you've got one, whether it's surprisingly good or impressively confusing, send it in. Listener submissions keep things spicy. Follow that link in the show notes for more. Thanks again for listening. Catch us next time when we take on another posting that definitely has something to say.